In this video, I'm going to talk about lubricating your Underdesk treadmill. What we're looking at here is the EgoFit Comfort Deck M2. It is my favorite of all of the Underdesk treadmills by a long shot. I'll post a link comparing some of the alternatives. At a quick glance, the way you lubricate your treadmill is that you apply the lubrication between the belt and the walking pad underneath in a zigzag fashion on both sides. And then you run the treadmill for 1 mile an hour just to distribute the lubrication through. But before I show you how to do that, let's talk about why we do it. A treadmill's heart is its motor, in the same way that an engine is the heart of a car. And the motors degrade over time. Eventually they die, just like an engine eventually dies on a car after a certain amount of mileage. The primary contributor to the death of a motor is heat. Heat buildup in the motor. Now, naturally, the motor builds heat just by usage, just by turning. But the other primary contributor of heat to the motor is the heat generated between the belt and the walking pad of a treadmill. The space between those two has a certain amount of friction, and that friction is primarily dryness between the belt and pad. So by applying lubrication to it periodically, you're creating a wet, slick, gliding surface that doesn't generate nearly as much heat. The heat is eventually spun through and distributed back to the motor. So we want to prevent as much heat buildup on the motor as possible. The recommendation is to lubricate your treadmill every 50 hours of usage or 3 months of usage. Somehow those are equivalent. I use my treadmill 40 hours a week. I use it full time at work, at least, and therefore I'm close enough to 50 hours a week that I've decided to lubricate my treadmill once a week. I just do it every Monday morning as a ritual just to make things simple. So every Monday morning I lubricate my treadmill. So in summary, we lubricate our treadmill to reduce friction between the belt and walking pad, which friction would build heat, which gets distributed over to the motor, which degrades the motor. So this maintenance task is the primary way of increasing the longevity of your treadmill, just like changing the oil in your car. Now, the EgoFit Comfort Deck M2 comes by default with one of these sampler tubes. This is garbage. And not because of the contents of the tube, but because of the applicator. Look how small that is. How the heck are you going to get under the belt all the way? Ends here. Most of the lubrication you want is going to be in the center. And the reason is a lot more of your walking is in the center than you realize with your footsteps. And there's a sort of opening space here that can breathe out. So lubrication on the edges is less critical than lubrication down the center. So the next thing people typically go to is one of these guys. It's cheaper than this, which is why they select it. And what's wrong with this is this tube. See how it's curved? Now they advertise this as some sort of a perk. They say that this flexible tube makes it easier to sort of get around weird edges and all that stuff. That is not the case. I've used this particular brand. I've gone through 4 or 5 of these bottles before I realized this thing exists. When you try to get it under, fish it under, and, do this, it has curved into a noodle underneath your belt. It is completely no way to apply the lubrication predictably. So the looseness or the flexiness of this guy is a real drag, and it makes applying lubrication a lot more difficult. So when you get your treadmill, throw away the sample bottle. Do not buy one of these flexi applicators. You need a long, firm applicator. This is still a little bit wobbly, but it's not flexible. You can't bend it. The firmer, the better. And the reason you want firm, like I said, is that it makes the application very predictable so that you don't have to worry about the straightness of the tube. This one gets all the way to the middle there. At least between the application of both sides, you'll reach the middle. Now, another benefit of this one, and I'll post a link in the show notes. Another benefit of this one is the applicator is separate from the tube. In this one, you have to squeeze it as hard as you can. And it makes it, again, harder to apply predictably how much you're distributing throughout the process. This one comes with the bottle and then a syringe. And what that allows you to do is when you're applying it, let me take off these little caps. Oh, crap. When you're applying it, you know exactly how much you have applied already as you're going through the process. So once you hit the halfway point on one side of the belt, you can stop and then move to the other halfway point on the other side of the belt. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to pull in the lube. There we go. I've got a full container. Now I can set this big guy aside. You got to be careful with the goo, creating a mess. Now what you do is you start on either side, on either end, and you start applying in a zigzag fashion, keeping an eye on the level you're at in the syringe, because you want to hit the halfway point of the syringe when you're done with one half of the treadmill. And that's about right. Okay. Now we're going to go to the other side and do the exact same thing. Now, what's really nice about the Comfort Deck M2 by Ego compared to a lot of the other treadmills is that these other treadmills, I used to own a GoYouth. That was my daily driver for, what really got me into treadmill desks in the first place. These other treadmills, the sides here are elevated. You see how elevated this side is and this side is? Usually on an Underdesk treadmill, that's height of the side pads all the way through. And so what they recommend you do in order to apply the lubrication is when they show you in the videos or the manual, they have you pinch up the belt quite hard, quite vigorously, pinch it and pull it up and then apply it under, because this one, you can just slip right under because this is level. This side panel is level. I've never seen this before. This is a huge benefit. That's not a contributing factor to why I bought this thing, but I was very pleased that was true. This side panel is level, so you can slip it right under. Whereas the GoYouth, this being high, you have to pinch and pull the belt up and squeeze the thing under and apply it. I still would recommend using this instead of the curly tube, even for that purpose. And that pinch and pull over time creates what's called belt drift. So when you're pulling on the belt, you're misaligning in micro amounts the belt on the rolling pins. And eventually that can lead to belt drift where the belt hits too hard against one side and it can actually damage the belt. Okay, so we've applied the lubrication. Now, the next thing you want to do is, just to keep things clean, you will sort of, just suck in some air and spit the rest. And you put it back in the box it came in. So keep that box. The reason being, the box will contain all the goo and you don't have to worry about making a mess wherever you store this lube. Okay, the final step is we plug the thing in and run it for about a minute just to distribute it evenly, because if you were to walk on it fresh after applying the lubrication, you'd sort of distribute the lubrication in your walking patterns in the specific way you walk. You'll do that soon enough. First, you want to have it distributed its own way, which is to say evenly, and then you can start walking on it. So we start it. We run it for about a mile an hour. I'm pumping it up to 2 kilometers per hour because this thing reads in kilometers, so close enough. Run it for 1 minute. And after about a minute, then you can start walking on it and then you're good to go.